Oh, I guess, there you go.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back for another one of our Deeper Learning Details deep dives. While we sort of take a look at how the practices of deeper learning are actually implemented in schools. This is sort of brought to you, if you remember, by the What School Could Be community, as well as our Center for Next Generation Leadership at the University of Kentucky. So tonight, we're super excited to have José Jiménez, a longtime friend, join to sort of talk about some work that he's been leading now for quite a number of years in New York City, in Queens, at PS 290Q, the ACE Academy of Scholars, and we'll share more about the school in just a second. But we wanted to dive in tonight on some leadership practices that are part of the deeper learning world, but that really create an inclusive community for the learners, or the scholars in his case, that are in our school buildings. So as you know from our Deeper Learning Details series so far, these are schools that Jason and I got to visit on our book tour around the country, and we got to hang out in Queens, and it was just such a remarkable day. We wanted to bring this back now for this audience. So welcome, Jose.
Glad to be here. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me and letting me get to share our school and our community.
No worries. So Jason's going to ask like a really crazy researchy question, and then we are going to jump right into the first question.
Well, not so crazy, but so we sent you over the sent form by email, which basically gets laid out that we're going to be recording this, we're going to be putting it out to the network, and we're going to be hopefully using it in our next book. So do you sent to us doing the recording and using the data for those publication purposes?
Yes, 100%.
Awesome. Much thanks. So let's go ahead and kick it off. Can you give the listeners a quick summary of what equity looks like at ACE Academy of Scholars? We were so deeply impressed with what you were doing. So can you paint us a little bit of a picture of what that might look like over there?
Yeah, so hi, everyone. My name is José Jiménez. I am the principal of PS 290 in Ridgewood, Queens, elementary school pre-K to 5th grade, about 600, that's sort of rounding it up. It's a very diverse school, you know, languages, economically, racially, ethnically. And so it kind of reflects Queens in a way, being like that. Equity for us and for me stepping into this role as an instructional leader rests on sort of these core principles of high quality instruction, high quality teachers and leaders, that they have access to and opportunities to curriculum and programs that are tailored individually and collectively to meet, you know, the needs of the students that you're serving, and that it's an environment that's inclusive, affirming, and that values the inherent brilliance that students bring. So that's kind of the principles that we set out early on. And that took really an envisioning process for us to get there, really thinking about why we're here, why we're educators, why we're teaching, what's the purpose. And so I think equity work really comes from it's introspection. If you're not really looking or diving deep as to the why, as you know, of schooling, or the why of teaching and learning, you know, it's hard to get to equity. But equity in and of itself in our school is not a thing that we do at 3 p.m., you know, at 2 p.m. or it's not a thing that you do. It's more of a philosophy that basically all students deserve, you know, the education that we might not have had, the school that we didn't or we've dreamed of. And so that's that mindset is really at the core of our school that we try to you know, have folks sort of adopt.
When you think about the awesome equity work that you see at ACE Academy of Scholars, how does that sort of differ from some of your peers? Like, how do you say, oh, we're totally different than what's happening over here? Do you have some markers of differences?
There are, I would say, so our why is also personal. So I think you can't, even though some people would like to detach the human from the teacher and be like, as a teacher, you're neutral and you're just supposed to instruct. We bring ourselves to teaching and to any school. So I, as a queer person who is an immigrant, wasn't born here, didn't speak English when I arrived. I don't look like have felt different in different spaces. I bring that to being a leader or to being an educator that I think sometimes separates me from others that might might feel more like this is an extension of themselves or their culture or I when I became an educator, part of my why was, like I said earlier, to create the school that I wish I had, where I didn't feel that silence was, a reason for me to feel like there was something wrong with me, that a school that openly spoke about issues or openly addressed, students from a place of trying to understand difference as a positive thing versus a negative thing. So I know that many colleagues are doing a lot of this work, but one thing, for example, is our school is one of the only few elementary schools, that you can count in one hand out of, I think, 700 or 800 in New York City that has a Gender and Sexuality Alliance, a GSA, at the elementary school level. That is, and since our school, and we won GSA of the Year award last year from the New York City, the UFT, the teachers union, they have a pride committee and they award a GSA of the Year award. And many schools have reached out to me after that, or just knowing that it's possible, many with questions about, how and how did you do it? Because there sometimes when it comes to equity work or just adopting a philosophy that is inclusive, people kind of fear the backlash of basically including everyone. Sometimes the schools have not, the status quo sometimes is that not everything is valued and sort of centered. I hope that was
Oh, yeah.
Loved it.
Sure. And I think your own personal, we got to talk about it for the book. You and I have this sort of shared background of being part of the Deeper Learning Leadership Forum that Envision with Hewlett Foundation money put forward. And I learned a lot in that whole experience, but I also got to learn a lot about you as a human. And I just, the personal story resonates deeply with me. And I think to listeners and folks watching this later, you bringing yourself authentically to the leadership role is something we don't see consistently leaders do. And you were bringing yourself to that from an equity standpoint, but also a deeper learning standpoint, in that the traditional school practices, we can get into that part of it. I do want to get into that part of it. But the authenticity to you as a leader, I think then filters down, right? That authenticity works its way and helps to form part of that inclusive space that we got to enjoy. So we got to tour the school, and I'll share screen for just a second, just doing some prep work for tonight. Sometimes we do wind up sharing websites out of this one, and I just want to share this image from the school's website, the huge welcome image and all of the different educators. It's a diverse set of, I'm guessing these are mostly the educators of the staff, the adults that work in the building.
Yeah.
And I just think that, right from the beginning, it's look, other than you being one of maybe only a couple of men, maybe not gender diverse, but certainly diverse in every other way. I think that really captures, and it also is the front of the school building that you all have, and inside of an amazing community that we got to just drive around Queens and find the school, and like, wow, what an intersection of the world that you get to have an elementary. And elementary, I want to get to parents in just a second, but like, I'm going to give a picture of learning that I got to see, and then you can sort of complement that picture of learning maybe a little. So as we get to walk around the school and just see classrooms in action, teachers in action, and kids in action, a couple of things, like, it was talkative. There was a lot of movement going on, a lot of conversation going on amongst kids and learners. It's just a lot of energy and activity bouncing around inside the building. Then another thing that I think stood out to me is that a lot of that was being driven in response to kids were doing things. There was a lot of building of things, tangible things going on. There was games. I remember talking to one of the teachers upstairs, multi-level, but one of the teachers upstairs about some pretty complex game that was unfolding, and like the students were trying to explain it to us too. And I mean, it was seriously engaged learning in the way that would make complete sense to the deeper learning part of our world. And then I think that deeper learning that students were getting to experience, the projects, the activities, the relationships with teachers, that complemented that inclusive community. So like, do you feel like I sort of capture that, and can you speak to that intersection between like what kids are doing on a daily basis and why it feels inclusive?
Yeah, no, I mean, we started when I became a principal my first year. We're co-located in New York. It's a common practice recently to have what is the District 75. It's the special education kind of district. It used to be where they had their own separate buildings. Naturally, that's problematic. It was like, oh, you go over there. So whenever a new school is built, a District 75 school is also in that building as a co-located school. We were part of a collaborative schools program, which was the DOE kind of trying to get those two schools to actually collaborate, as opposed to just be two schools sharing one building. And the principal that started the same year as I did, we were we worked really well together, and we started hashtag inclusion revolution. So we had children from there, we had buddy classrooms, so their kids would come into our class. And then the following year, we started an actual inclusion program where we share children. They're in our classrooms full time, their hours and theirs, and services are shared. Something that's also kind of not, our school's not the only one, but it's not necessarily the common practice. So that kind of inclusion, where is including learning difference, was definitely central to kind of having kids interact with each other in sort of game-like ways, or our hallways are constant. Kids are doing projects in the hallways. The game you mentioned was the World Peace Game by John Hunter, the socio-political simulation. Yes. Which is amazing. The fourth and fifth grade, they're going to do it this year as well. But yeah, ultimately, it bleeds into the culture of the school, where kids are understand that learning is not a thing that they do from a book per se, like just turn the page, but it's something that you actually have to experience. And a lot of the times that means that you do it with other people, from other classes, from other adults. We have enrichment programs that are kind of designed that way, so that they make connections that are not just about this is the grade that I'm in, and this is the class that I'm in, and I have to complete this task to move on to the next grade. Yeah, so I think you captured some of that energy that I definitely feel as I walk in classrooms. And from the very beginning of the envisioning process, when we gathered teachers and parents to discuss the vision and mission of the school when I became the principal, was, why are we here? What do we want kids to be, to do? What we would like learning to look like? And everyone expressed the same things that, you would want your children to experience. It's, you want them to love to learn. You want them to want to come to school, to not just learn how to, give you the answer, but actually ask why, question the problem, or be able to offer more than just sort of the expected solution. And that kind of became the thread that the teachers kind of hold on to, that in order to have a good lesson, kids have to be talking, kids have to be doing something, that they, it's not about whether they get it right at the end.
And definitely felt that sense amongst teachers that it was a little different teaching at your particular school, in just how active and engaged they needed to be. This is, I mean, elementary schools, in a general way, elementary teachers are more tightly connected to kids than middle and high. Sorry for middle and high folks watching later, but yours were, I think, a bit further than that. I want to transition, though, if possible, while we're sort of trying to still give a sense of the place. Another thing that felt very different is the parents. I'm parents of elementary kids myself, and you have this parents generally are more engaged at the elementary level in a general way, and so that you have some parent engagement going on is probably not abnormal. But parents seemed more connected. I remember that big open space out in front of the school, and parents would find their kids there. And there was almost a sense of home to the parents too. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, no, that is something, again, I don't know every school. I know my approach is definitely parent involvement is super important. I hear this from some colleagues sometimes, because it's like a can of worms. Sometimes over involvement then means that everything you do is questioned or challenged. I don't mind that, and so they have my personal cell phone number. I give it out every year in meetings all the time, so I get tagged. That's sort of my stance. Like, if you need to reach out to me, I am available 24/7. I know that that's not necessarily, it has its costs, but I do that because that's how I want them to feel. I want parents to feel like I'm accessible, that I am there for their children. And that's the truth. But it makes it feel like, yes, when you're coming to our school, you're coming to a community. This is not a place where you just drop off your children and then, like, we instruct and then you get them back, but they're a part of something, and so are you. So it's easier when challenging things happen to have discussions with parents if they feel like that's the case already, that they're talking to someone who cares. And there are different ways of showing that, but that, for me, that's one way. We have them do after school programs, the parents leading it. If they're an architect, then please lead an enrichment and a teacher will support you. When we put up musical theater, all the stage moms, please, or stage dads, come, build the props with us. So it becomes we had parents staying till 8 p.m., 9 p.m. at the school building, constructing things, or so it's we recently were discussing about having outdoor lunch, because of COVID, and someone designed how it would look, and using the same thing we want our kids to do, which is use their skills and demonstrate kind of community. We expect the parents. So we have meetings. I do a coffee with the principal every month, which is just about generating ideas. A lot of the time it's kind of like the design thinking process that I bring into it, which we learned in Vision, and sort of having parents also, guardians ideate around what they want the school to be better at. So I would say it's that that makes it kind of welcoming, that it's not, this is your school too. And because of that, I do feel like when issues arise, because not everyone agrees on everything. When issues arise, people do enter conversations with a level of respect that like you want. And that, which is what sometimes I hear colleagues will say, in some schools, there's no parent engagement, and they prefer that, which I'm always like, but the kids are not going to benefit from that. But it's almost like, well, but then I don't have issues. And it's kind of like framing it in the wrong way. If you, by having parent engagement, you decrease issues that arise later, because people actually, are connected to you, versus they just think that you're this figurehead, or that the school is an institution versus a community, or, yeah.
I love it. And I want to almost kind of, I know Jason, he always gets mad at me. We go a little off script. It's not like I want to go off script. I just want to, this is one of the details moments that I want to dive into, and Pohai over in the chat did too. So I invite you into the space too, around like that. Pohai, you had said building the messes. I'm super fascinated by those coffees and the design thinking, and really inviting them to design the school with you. I mean, just playing in that space. I mean, one of the things that we love in the world of deeper learning and equity leadership is the liberatory design skills and frameworks, and like the whole mindset around liberatory design is massively powerful. And so it feels to me, and Jose, you can confirm or deny, but like you're opening a space for parents to engage in liberatory design for their own school in a relationship between you and parents.
I mean, yeah, ultimately, I say it all the time in meetings that this is, our school. This is your kid's school. We're creating a legacy here about, students learning, learning and going beyond our school. So they're very involved. I do say, one of the things that I always say is that inclusion is not optional. That to some degree, there are some boundaries, which are that we do think about others. Like we have to center everyone, not just some folks. And so if we do that, then anything is game, fair game. So a lot of the times it does mean in that design, it's like, are we thinking about everyone? And just like universal design, is our idea or our thoughts including everyone? And if it is, then we can move forward. So there's still, a level of kind of guiding, and it's just a principle. I mean, it's just a simple principle, I just like what I want teachers to be able to do, the same kind of design in their classrooms, is to take risks, to try something new, to not think that they're going to be evaluated in a very strict way, but actually be rewarded for doing something that might not be great, but they tried it and they learned, which is the same thing that we want kids to do, which would be the same way that I approach parent meetings. It's about you're at the table with everyone else, and this school is like a living thing. There's no, we're designing the blueprint of the school as we go.
It's just want to capture that, because it is what a powerful leadership practice. I don't know if anyone has brought that. I don't know where did you get that from someone else, or did you just like stumble into it, Jose? Because
I'm sure I got it from someone else. In terms of, one thing that as a leader I've done is meet amazing people, like connect with other leaders, other school, across the country. So I joined a lot of fellowships, because I realized learning in general, it doesn't happen only in one place. So if you stay in one place, like you're only going to get, and so I've tried to expand my thinking by connecting with people that think differently than me, or maybe have some similar ideas or ideals, but are so yes, I'm sure all of this I've learned from someone else or read somewhere, but it's also I think to connect it back to like my why. Like I became I wasn't someone who wanted to be a teacher from when they were younger, but kind of decided to be one because I wanted to be part of schools and teach children and kind of have a better experience than I did. And so that, I think, it's a big driving force for why I think about schools this way, that they're supposed to think about the people in them as opposed to kind of be this thing that like people go into.
Love it. Love it. Just huge kudos, compliments. When the Dinter Smith film team is watching this and like looking for places to go capture a moment, you doing liberatory design with your parents to co-create what we want the school to be. That is a Kodak moment. I know that's a super old reference, but like that is definitely something that the nation needs to hear more. Like that's super powerful. So kudos. Okay, Jason, onward. Sorry, back to regular
good.
programming. Or Pohai, if you want to jump in, you can too. I mean, jump in, go ahead. It's okay. It's a comfortable space, not a huge crowd. So let's just enjoy tonight.
I'm good. Aloha first and foremost. From Moku Keawe from Hawaii Island. No, I'm good. I'm interested to see the blending of everyone. It's so vital, and that's what I live for, the blending. And I can see it. It's very encouraging, by the way, Jose.
Oh,
your efforts. How encouraging is that? That's what I love plugging into this, when I have the time, because it's such an IV moment, just hook me up. It's great. So yeah, I'm listening and I'm enjoying, and bless all of you for being here today.
Thank you.
So Jose, you talked about how when you became the leader of the school, how long you been here?
6 years. This is my 6th year as a school leader.
Okay.
I was a teacher there too for.
Oh, that's right.
So I was kind of went from just changed roles, but
deep roots there.
Yeah.
So you mentioned starting off with an envisioning process with the teachers, parents, and leaders. Did you have any challenges at the beginning as far as some folks feeling pushed out or getting pushed back? So can you talk about that startup into this whole new culture or more double down culture of equity and inclusion?
Yeah, not in the beginning of the envisioning process, which was the sort of the beginning, was not. There wasn't a lot of pushback in the sense that people wanted to be. Who doesn't want to participate in sort of designing their workspace or their why they're there or how the system of value that exists. I think with anything is that there's always reservations about what it means for like in the long term. So when we were envisioning and determining what expectations, what we thought would be best, that they were too high, that people wouldn't meet them, or that these were lofty goals, that I the issue of idealist versus realist, like what can I actually we can dream, but what can we actually do? So those, I think, happened, and they were they were discussed as part of the process. That when you envision something, it's not set in stone, and that it's not about like, well, if you didn't achieve it, then it was the whole venture was not worthwhile. That the whole point of it is that you are are moving towards a direction, and that it's it's a what's the saying? Not a sprint. It's a or like escape me. It's not a race, or that it's you're taking steps towards what we hope for, and so pushback didn't really come in that process. I think over time there has been, of course, when doing anything new, whether it's so we audited our curriculum. And so when we did that, we found that the story that we were telling about different groups of people, different, countries, different, from pre-K to fifth grade, was a little uneven. Not all authors that could have been represented were represented. There was a disbalance. We did that with our curriculum, and students did that with their classroom libraries, and then asked for more books. And when that happened, of course, there was the issue of like, oh, well, that means we have to change some of our units of study. And as we know, when we have something designed and then we're like, oh, we have to change it, it just creates work. But that was still met with not opposition, but was met with, a challenge that we didn't necessarily see coming. Some folks didn't see how their unit of study, when you looked at the whole school, might be problematic, because in their grade they were like, oh, we're reading about Latin American folk tales, but they were all like presenting one class or one sort of narrative, and then in other grades they were presenting the same narrative. So there was no alternative realistic view of not all people from Latin America are struggling economically. Like, that's not the only message that we should be sending or reading about pre-K to fifth grade. And so when you look at the whole picture, it did mean that some things had to change. And change is not always the easiest thing to do, especially when you've invested time in creating. So our school doesn't purchase a curriculum, we design our own. So again, it's that idea in of itself means that you're open to change, but also when you develop something and you think it's working, oh, the kids respond to it, but then eventually you have to take a look over time and make changes. So I would say the only type of kind of pushback that has happened is around that, like just gradual change that sometimes we want to go faster, but it's going to be gradual and it's not right away. But when it comes to a lot of the expected challenges, so we do a survey about inclusion and equity to sort of get perspectives from staff. A lot of them thought that they were going to have more challenges from the community about reading books about LGBTQ topics, or the presented things in multiple perspectives. So, and that hasn't really happened. So I think there's also we sometimes are our worst critic, or that we kind of sabotage progress because based on perception, and it's not always real.
I love how you took a critical look at the experience that the kids were having across the teachers, right? Because you might go in one classroom and be like, yeah, this is beautiful, you're doing a good job. But you had to look the breadth of the experience and say, we're not getting enough disparate voices here. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, that was how we started it. Every grade team did their own audit, but the whole point was then to share the findings of each grade so that we could map what stories were we telling, what stories were we not telling, and how we were telling these, what was the total story. So it wasn't about teachers every grade having to feel, and this came up, they're like, oh, do we have to teach a book from Korea, a book from Mexico, a book that it wasn't about compartmentalizing or trying to represent everyone. Is about what are overall in our school from when they enter to when they leave. How have stories of different groups of people, different cultures really been valued, honored, versus just like put in for the sake of checking a box?
Sure.
Or like they were, are we telling or at least trying to tell the whole picture, as opposed to just a fragment of the picture?
So I'm jumping in just
Love
to
it.
share for a second, sort of a complimentary piece where there's some details available on your site around some of how you share around the global connections that you're trying to achieve. And then you're being upfront with everyone about this is going to be a project-based kind of activity, and that we hope to see parent participation, and here's how much time we spend each week. And I know, like, especially through the pandemic, this might not be completely reflective of every of how it's gone the last 2 years, but that I just think that's some detail. When that detail's out there, I love to share it so folks can go track it down. But framing it, I think it's good. Everyone can learn from you all in that global framing. That this sort of global sense of students as global citizens with familiarity of global issues. I mean, of course, being in the midst of this massively diverse community in Queens with so many parts of the globe represented, but that makes sense in rural Kentucky too. Like global skills, framing it that way is a great way, I think, to frame what we're trying to achieve here for kids.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, the opposite of that. I think it's dangerous if you only focus on, again, like either one story or one, having things be very familial, very common to you, then it's very hard to interact in the world and in the spaces that those children will eventually enter. And maybe at the elementary school level, since that is we treat it like it's the foundation. Like this is, if we do a good job, they're going to be better off being able to handle all the things that come later. And that includes, so that this is where I tell parents all the time, because they're, sometimes they think that like this is Harvard, or like, that whatever happens now, it's like this is a time where they can fall, like break their leg and heal and move, they can fail, and the stakes are a lot lower, but it's still super important that they learn sort of that the value of experience, and it's hard to do if you don't also contextualize it to a larger sort of environment that eventually they will be a part of. A lot of parents sometimes like to shield or bubble, they're like, they're not ready for this, or this will lead them to have a different, a mindset, or think negatively, or they'll be scared about certain things. And, there's of course something to be said about that, but there's also something, the opposite of kind of shielding someone from truth or from reality is sometimes, carries a burden too later on. So not to say that, so in our fourth grade, they'll read about the Holocaust. That's a hard topic to read about. But you can't shield students from only learning about positive, what might be positive. It's about how they, how they learn something and educate. That's why I mentioned part of equity is having high quality, that folks that are there for the right reasons. And sometimes, you might have not come in for the right reason, and you develop that reason. Sometimes you came in for the right reason and you grow out of it. You know, so it's constant. What schools have to develop people, and when people are don't have the philosophy, then that might not be the school for them. But ultimately, students do need access to to topics that will develop their thinking versus things that will make them happy. Like that's not the only kind of measure for elementary school. Like as long as they're just happy, then it's all good. They also have to be challenged by tough things and learn how to deal with that, so that because they will later on.
So
oh, go ahead.
yeah, jump in.
I was just gonna add that part of the mapping, I think, for parents and getting parents involved should be what is the same. What is the same in all the cultures, or what is the same? Focusing on the sameness and not so much on the difference is something that I'd really like to encourage in the parent involvement. And get them involved in that way, so they too can learn, not just the child. I have a saying that we're not just teaching the child, we're teaching the child of the parent. And most parents do not have a really good history with education. They didn't have a pleasant situation. So if they didn't have a pleasant situation, they're not going to make that same kind of connection for their child. And so I have a saying that, a pohai saying, what we call in Hawaiian, olelo noyao, a proverb. But my saying is, we are not just teaching the child in our classroom. We're teaching the child of the parent as well. And so how do we teach them both successfully, right? So I just wanted to share that. I thought the mapping is such a great idea, especially for parents to be involved in that process as well.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, they have to be involved. That's, like I mentioned earlier, if they're not, the children are the one that lose out, because you could be doing one thing and then it's being canceled out when they go home. That if there's no thread, like you said, what's common, what is the and for us it was about, what do you want your kid to be able to do? You want your child to be able to be independent, be self-sufficient, be a good person, care, sort of live their dream. Like these are when we've done the design thinking, and we did a portrait of a graduate with parents as well, that process was maybe very idealistic, but still very concrete to what some of the skills that they wanted their kids to be: creative, critical thinkers, problem solvers. These are some of the what we end up with, the 5 C's, effective communicators, tied to deeper learning. So for many of them, they told us, this is not the school, this is the school we wish we had, which, like, I feel like if I feel I'm doing my job, is that's the point. Many of us did not have the school we wish we had or that we deserved. Sometimes it became, schools were, spaces where, you were kind of funneled in, and if you didn't, behave in a certain way, you were put in a different place. When I first arrived to this country, I was very talkative. I spoke a different language. They tried to put me in a class that was for gardening and computers. And sometimes when I think about it, I'm like, oh, I should have, like, that would have been great to learn gardening and computer. Like, it wasn't necessarily those skills were, but the ESL teacher at the time told my mom, like, this is a class that they put the kids that they don't think are going to go to college, that they're not, it was a place where kids are put for a reason, versus like, oh, they're, this is their passion. This is, so I would have a program in my school that's for gardening and computers, and that was interest based, but not because, oh, they're not doing, let's get them out of here and put them there. to separate them from others. So all that to say is that sometimes schools were not are not designed in the way to promote the individual. Sometimes they're kind of promoting that everyone homogeny, that you behave a certain way and that's rewarded, and if you're different, that's so. In our school we try to reward the opposite in a way. It's we want different kinds, divergent thinking. There is, oh, you thought about a problem that way, amazing, that let's showcase that, as opposed to like that you got the right answer, because it's the thinking that matters more than and kids then will take more risks. So the same thing with parents. If they're invited to a meeting and it's about like, what do you I do share what's happening and then open up for questions, but it's always inviting for them to also lead the meeting. Like, it's not just me sort of leading. It's like, what do you want? I know that sometimes, I was asked once, like, we should have a rock climbing wall, and it's like, oh, there's some ideas that I wish I could make happen, and people do want certain things that are very particular, but even that, just feeling like you could ask your school for something that could be possible, I think makes it so that parents feel like it's their school as well.
Lovely. And I love the reflection on your own learning, and then just want to remind the space that, like, when is that dissertation defense scheduled?
Oh my God.
So
hopefully sooner than later.
Exactly. You're definitely pushing way past the gardening expectations at the early expectations. Although, like you said, like, from a deeper learning project-based world, like, nothing wrong with gardening. That would have been
wrong at all.
Like, what a great context to learn science in. But we know our systems, and it's a form of tracking inherent in the system that, we know it's there, and it's there as early as elementary, right? And so I think part of the reason we want to do the interview today is just to, those traditional practices, we just don't need them. Like, there is like the right thing to do here, which is to make a super inclusive school, and like, it's an ethically good thing to do, but like, just practically, logistically, what is that achieving? It's elementary school, right? Like, we don't need to set up our college going kids versus our, like, what are you doing?
Yeah. No, and one way a simple way that we've thought about is, cooperation versus competition. So there's like, some parents will come in and, like, the ones that's seeking, like, is my child in the most challenging class? What they're going to compete with other people later on in life. I want them to be the best, that kind of mentality. While it is sometimes, works for people achieving things. At the elementary school level, what we want them to do, and again, and this happened with us really discussing, like, what do you want? Do you want your child to be cutthroat and like cut people up just to be the winner? Most people would say no. I want my child to be able to, collaborate with people and get along, and so that is learned by not always competing, and it doesn't mean that they'll not be able to compete when they have to, but that they understand that it's not about the win. Like, that's it, the journey matters just as much as what you get in the end. And so if you only focus on your child kind of achieving like the accolades, the trophies, so we don't do, like, we have effort awards like that, and so it's rewarding effort. It doesn't have to do with whether you have the highest grade, or it's and that is not saying that everyone gets a trophy, but it's rewarding effort, which matters even if you failed. So I think it's sometimes a mindset. Parents always want their kids to have it better than they did, and sometimes when they're looking back at their their issues with schooling. Sometimes it's that they weren't prepared well enough. They didn't, sometimes they blame themselves, and sometimes it was the school. The institution of learning kind of failed them. And so they want their kids to be the best. And sometimes for our school, it's like reframing that, like you want your kid to be the best human, like the whole child, not just be the best at math or the best at reading, but be the best whole child, which includes not being able to collaborate, being able to think creatively, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to always get a perfect score on the standardized tests. That's not the measure that that we will be using to determine whether your child is worth, has learned anything.
Also not the measure we're using that much anymore at the University of Kentucky, by the way. So, I mean, like the whole world is transitioning away. And so I think that you're part of something that hopefully is really starting to take root.
For sure.
Opening up the space, Jason, you can jump back in with Janelle.
Yeah, Jose. I'm recording the rest to my computer. So, all right. So Jose, so we're hearing a lot of schools who are saying, school leaders who are saying, we want to place equity first. We want to do more equity work. We want to do more inclusion, but a lot of it's really superficial. So it's not as deep as what you're doing. You've really thought a lot of this out and you're living it and you seem to be committed to it. So what advice would you give to schools that want to do better at this and deeper and more meaningfully?
Yeah. I mean, I would first, because it's like, it's the fear of when anything kind of like hot topic education thing comes up, that people are just gonna, like you said, like it becomes surface. It's a thing that you did, and then, oh, now it's the new thing. That this is more of a, more of a mindset that for me has been placing inclusion first. If you want your kids to really be, again, like you have to know what you want your kids to be. You have to start first with like kind of the end in mind. What do you hope for? And if you start there, it's the map towards that, or the road towards that has to be that you're going to do that with your teachers, that you're going to do that with your parents, that you can't say. So equity work is not just looking at data and disaggregating by race or by, that it doesn't live in trying to address problems without addressing the root cause. And the root cause of equity issues are cultural issues, or societal issues, or how we interact with each other. So I would say for any school that's really trying to do equity work, they would have to personalize the why they're in the building, and who are the people in the building and why they're there, and get to know each other in that way. So we did have an equity team that was, that's also a concrete something that you could do, and that could be a mini kind of mini way of dealing with a big macro issue, which is by getting a group of people together that want to open up the discussions around this, how our school could be better, or how our school could address everyone and include everyone, and really start at that foundation, which is getting to know that team very well, like letting people tell you their personal stories. I learned from some that had been refugee in their country, and then education has been it's amazing what you don't know about people. But if you only actually just asked or even said like, I want to know, and when you put colleagues, people that have been maybe teaching in the same grade for years and don't know any of these things together, it starts the momentum towards what we're doing here is not just teaching these lessons, but what we're doing here is creating a community where that's supposed to reflect or be like a microcosm of what we'd hope the larger society is. I think schools have the power to be that. when you put people together for that amount of hours, doing so much thing in collaboration. But I think some people might get lost in the task of it, of like, disaggregating and the data and subgroups and wanting to kind of fix the problem without first like addressing it more simply, which is like, who are we, why are we here, like and how do we work together, like, and starting there. I think more will be revealed to you as a school leader or as a school as to what the next steps are. But yes, ultimately you do have to think about how like reflect on how people are faring, how the curriculum, like we said, we audited eventually, like there are things that data points that you have to look at, but I think a start is more with people, starting
Awesome.
with the people.
Love it.
Awesome, Jose. Well, let's wrap. They might have a different meeting scheduled in here.
Right,
and
people are trying to pop in.
Yeah, exactly, which is fine. But thanks for sharing all of the detail on how you're actually leading for inclusion there at ACE Academy for Scholars in Queens, New York. You're an amazing leader. It's been an honor to learn from you these last couple of years. And I'm sure you're going to get follow-ups. I already got some love coming in the chat. I've already got a couple of messages, DMs going on behind the scenes. Yeah, thanks, Janelle. I think yours is a voice that we all would love to keep hearing from. So
thank you, I appreciate it. Thank you
We'll
guys.
get to your defense. We hope we get an invite.
yeah, exactly. Jason and I might follow up. I mean, we're always working on projects, right? So you're getting to that point where, like, if you want to get involved in projects that are I'm open door for you.
For
yes,
sure.
thank you, I appreciate it. All right,
All right. Thank you, Jose. It's been awesome. Appreciate you.
Take care.